The people of the water, along the quiet shores and deep forests of the Pacific Northwest. This is the High Strangeness Sleep Society. Out here, the world feels older, the forests are thick, the light comes in filtered and soft, and sound doesn't travel the way you expect it to. It gets caught, absorbed, turned around. What you hear and what you think you hear are not always the same thing. And somewhere in that quiet, just beyond the edges of what can be clearly seen, there are accounts of something that moves with intention, something that watches without being noticed, something that has been described for far longer than any modern story should allow. Tonight we're not here to chase it down or pin it into certainty. We're here to sit with it, to walk slowly through the accounts, the history, and the landscape itself, and to consider what it means when so many people, across so much time, describe something that feels just out of reach. Because in these forests, the distance between the known and the unknown is not as wide as it seems, and sometimes it feels like that distance is closing. This is the High Strangeness Sleep Society. The Pacific Northwest of North America is a place where forest is not merely a backdrop, but the dominant feature of the landscape. In western Washington, Oregon, and northern California, marine storms rolling off the Pacific Ocean drop prodigious amounts of moisture on west-facing valleys. The rainforests of Olympic National Park, for example, receive 140 to 167 inches of precipitation every year, while winter temperatures rarely drop below freezing and summer highs seldom exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This combination of abundant rain and moderate climate allows conifers such as Sitka spruce and western hemlock to grow hundreds of years old, reaching 250 feet in height and 30 to 60 feet in circumference. Their trunks are draped with epiphytic mosses, ferns, and lichens, creating a jungle-like feel. Fallen logs become nurse logs for seedlings, while the thick layered canopy moderates temperature and humidity. Forest floors are carpeted with sword ferns and oxalis, and even the branches high above support gardens of moss, making the landscape lush and visually dense. In such an environment, sound is absorbed and redirected by vegetation, light filters through in narrow bands, and the sense of distance is often uncertain. It is easy to feel alone just a short distance from a trail. Long before highways and logging roads threaded through these valleys, people lived here. The indigenous communities of the region developed relationships with the land that predated the United States by millennia. Among those traditions are accounts of beings that move through the forests, tall, hair-covered, human-like figures, sometimes called forest people. In the early 20th century, the term Sasquatch was popularized by anthropologist J.W. Burns, who gathered stories from First Nations people in British Columbia and anglicized a word from the Halkomelem language meaning hairy man. Burns wrote that these beings were described as a tribe of hairy people who lived in mountains, caves, and tunnels. The modern word Bigfoot did not appear until 1958, when loggers in Northern California discovered large footprints and a local newspaper used the term. For many indigenous people, though, the presence long preceded the name. Tonight, the High Strangeness Sleep Society returns to its Pacific Northwest home to listen to those older stories and to explore why the figure endures. Our purpose is not to prove or debunk. We are not hunting a monster. We are walking into a landscape where dense, old-growth forest moderates climate and hides movement, where mosses and lichens hang in draperies from branches, and where a layered canopy creates shadow and stillness. Here, a being that avoids people could remain unseen for generations. We begin with the old stories, then consider how the environment itself could conceal a large bipedal animal. We examine footprints, film, sounds, and eyewitness accounts, explore competing theories, and end with why the legend persists. Throughout, we use the respectful term Sasquatch, acknowledge that the stories come from many indigenous nations, and avoid hard-to-pronounce names for ease of listening. If you're ready, we will step off the trail and into the deep forest. Across the Pacific Northwest, indigenous communities have long included hair-covered forest people in their oral traditions. These descriptions are remarkably consistent despite variations in language and detail. The beings are large, muscular, and bipedal, standing roughly 6 to 9 feet tall. They are covered in dark hair and have broad shoulders, long arms, and little or no visible neck. Some accounts describe faces that look more human than ape. In stories, these creatures live in remote mountains and forests, moving on 2 legs and avoiding contact with people. Early 20th century collectors of indigenous stories recorded that these wild people were a tribe who dwelt in caves and tunnels and would sometimes steal fish or confuse hunters with whistles, but they were not regarded as monsters. Instead, they were another presence in a shared landscape. When settler culture encountered these ideas, the descriptions often became more sensational, but the core features persisted. The Oregon Encyclopedia notes that most people who claim to have seen Bigfoot describe hair-covered bipeds up to 8 feet tall. They are characterized as non-aggressive animals whose shyness and human-like intelligence make them elusive. While some wilderness travelers report smelling a strong odor or hearing screams and whistles, the beings generally avoid confrontation. On reservations today, sightings and stories continue, representing a spiritual connection to the pre-contact past. One common element across these accounts is awareness. Elders warn against entering certain parts of the forest, not because a monster lurks there, but because someone else already occupies the space. Hunters moving through remote valleys describe a sudden shift in atmosphere, a sense of being observed. It is not fear so much as recognition. Something is matching their pace in the tree line, staying just out of sight. The advice is simple: do not pursue, respect the boundary, leave. The Oregon Encyclopedia notes that Native Americans in Oregon have increasingly situated Bigfoot within traditional belief systems as beings with deep cultural significance. When hunters, hikers, and loggers report brief glimpses of large, upright figures moving smoothly through the forest, older community members connect these encounters to long-held stories rather than treating them as legends in need of proof. Early accounts recorded by settlers sometimes blurred the line between indigenous tradition and frontier folklore. In 1924, miners near Mount St. Helens claimed that their cabin was attacked by giant apes, and local newspapers reported the incident widely. Native people used the opportunity to speak publicly about their own knowledge of hairy wild people of the woods. Later, when large footprints were found on logging roads in 1958, reporters asked whether these prints belonged to a wild man or an unknown species. Though the media often framed the question as a mystery, for many longtime residents, the presence of a forest person was already part of the world. By the time the term Bigfoot entered popular culture in the late 1950s, indigenous stories had been circulating for generations. To understand how an animal as large as a human could remain largely unseen in the Pacific Northwest, one must appreciate the physical structure of these forests. The temperate rain forests west of the Cascades are often called ocean-born because the moisture they receive comes directly from the Pacific. Storms drop 140 to 167 inches of rain each year. Temperatures remain moderate, seldom falling below freezing and rarely climbing above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This climate fosters dense, layered vegetation. Sitka spruce, western hemlock. Many are hundreds of years old and reach heights of 250 feet. Understory plants such as salmonberry, huckleberry, Oregon oxalis, and sword fern flourish, while mosses, liverworts, and lichens drape every surface. In the Hoh and Quinault valleys, sunlight barely reaches the forest floor. Epiphytes, plants that grow on other plants, festoon trunks and branches, giving the forest a jungle-like feel. Nurse logs provide elevated seed beds for new trees, and when the logs decay, they leave behind rows of trees on stilt-like roots. Dead wood persists for centuries, offering habitat for fungi, small mammals, and amphibians. This structural complexity creates countless hiding places. Even a large animal could move through such a landscape with minimal noise. Layers of moss and damp vegetation muffle footsteps. Downed logs and dense undergrowth provide cover, and the thick canopy moderates temperature, encouraging animals to be active at dawn, dusk, or at night. Roosevelt elk browse the understory, but their presence does little to open the forest. The canopy remains intact. In winter, fog often fills the valleys as rain and dew turn into low clouds. Visibility can drop to a few yards. It is easy to understand why a hair-covered biped with human-like intelligence might maintain distance from humans without being noticed. Sound behaves differently here as well. Dense vegetation absorbs high-frequency noise, and the uneven terrain scatters sound waves. A branch snapping a few dozen yards away might never reach human ears. Meanwhile, the constant drip of water from moss and canopy can mask subtle movements. When hunters describe being paced by something just inside the tree line, they are often responding not to loud noise but to an absence of expected sounds. The forest grows too quiet, and there is a sense of being observed. In such an environment, avoidance is more effective than hiding. A creature that understands human movement could simply adjust its position to stay downwind and out of sight, using fallen logs and vegetation as cover. When darkness falls, the forest becomes an even more effective barrier. Without artificial light, even animals as large as elk are difficult to see. For something with dark hair, the nights would provide near total concealment. Researchers who support a biological explanation for Sasquatch note that large primates are adept at remaining undetected in dense habitats. Mountain gorillas were not scientifically documented until 1902, despite living in relatively small ranges and being larger than humans. Orangutans spend most of their lives high in trees, rarely seen from the ground. If an undiscovered North American primate existed, it would likely use strategies similar to those of known great apes, moving in small family groups, traveling primarily at night, avoiding open areas, and leaving few traces. Cryptozoologists who advocate the Bigfoot Gigantopithecus hypothesis argue that a surviving descendant of the extinct Gigantopithecus could roam vast forests and remain undetected. While this theory is speculative, and mainstream science notes that Gigantopithecus fossils indicate a quadrupedal ape weighing over 1,200 pounds, the behavior described, nocturnal activity, avoidance of humans, and dispersal across large territories, aligns with how a large, intelligent animal might persist in a densely vegetated environment. Ultimately, the Pacific Northwest's rainforests offer a plausible stage for a shy, intelligent biped to avoid detection. The interplay of climate, vegetation, topography, and sound creates natural cover. In the next section, we examine the footprints that first brought the modern public's attention to the subject and explore whether physical evidence supports the stories. In late September 1958, road construction workers east of the Cascade Mountains discovered giant footprints along a new logging road near Bluff Creek in Northern California. Jerry Crew, a bulldozer operator, found a line of prints in the mud and showed them to his co-workers. Several men reported seeing similar tracks at previous job sites. The footprints were 16 inches long and sunk deep into the mud. When reporters from the Humboldt Times interviewed the workers, they learned that the men had been referring to the unknown track maker as Bigfoot. Journalist Andrew Genzoli published a column on October 6, 1958, describing the prints and quoting loggers who joked that the tracks might belong to a relative of the abominable snowman. Genzoli's story included a photograph of Crew holding a plaster cast of one of the footprints, and the term Bigfoot entered national discourse. News of the prints spread quickly. Newspapers across the United States picked up the story, and people began sending in reports of similar footprints and encounters. The prints themselves were striking, enormous human-like impressions with 5 toes and a stride length far exceeding that of an average person. Plaster casts made by Crew and others show footprints as large as 24 inches long and 8 inches wide. Some casts display what look like dermal ridges, patterns similar to fingerprints, which some physical anthropologists argue would be difficult to fake. Physical anthropologists Grover Krantz and Jeff Meldrum have studied footprint casts and concluded that the anatomy of the prints suggests a non-human primate, citing features such as a flexible mid-tarsal break and dermal ridges. Not all footprint evidence is compelling. The Arizona State Museum notes that hundreds of similar footprints and a few handprints have been reported since the late 1950s, but some were clearly made by bears and others are fraudulent. The same page states that a family member of road builder Ray Wallace later revealed that Wallace had been carving large wooden feet and using them to make tracks. He and a group of foresters had created wooden feet in the 1930s to scare huckleberry pickers and used similar tools to make prints at construction sites. The hoax claims do not explain every footprint, but they illustrate how easily such evidence can be fabricated. Footprint casts connected to the most famous Bigfoot sighting were made in 1967. After filming the creature at Bluff Creek, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin returned to the film site with plaster and made 2 casts of the best quality right and left footprints. The Arizona State Museum holds a copy of a cast from that event. A footprint 18 inches long and 9.2 inches wide. Another cast in their collection is a copy of a supposed Bigfoot handprint found in Washington in 1970. The hand impression measures 12.7 inches long and 10.4 inches wide. These casts are considered important historical artifacts regardless of authenticity. They demonstrate that something physically large left impressions in the mud, but they do not by themselves prove the existence of a new species. Despite decades of footprint discoveries, there is still no conclusive physical evidence. Prints can be faked. Bears sometimes stand on 2 legs and leave impressions that resemble human footprints, and heavy human boots can distort when the ground is soft. Skeptics argue that if a breeding population of large primates existed in the Pacific Northwest, there should by now be bones, hair, scat, or a carcass. Proponents counter that a wide-ranging, intelligent animal could live in small family groups, avoid humans, and that the wet, acidic soils of rainforests quickly decompose remains. The debate continues. In the next section, we examine the piece of evidence that brought Bigfoot into mainstream consciousness worldwide, the Patterson-Gimlin film. On October 20th, 1967, Roger Patterson and his friend Robert Bob Gimlin were on horseback along Bluff Creek in Northern California. They were riding upstream, generally northeast, along the east bank of the creek. It was early afternoon, somewhere between 1:15 p.m. and 1:40 p.m., when they came to an overturned tree with a large root system and a logjam left over from a flood. As they rounded this debris, they reportedly saw a large hair-covered biped on the opposite bank. Gimlin later said he was in a mild state of shock when he first saw the figure. Patterson estimated the creature's height at 6 to 7.5 feet, though later analysis suggested this might have been overstated. Gimlin's estimate was about 6 feet. Patterson's horse reared. He dismounted, retrieved his 16mm camera from a saddlebag, and began filming while running after the creature. The film that resulted is about 59.5 seconds long at 16 frames per second. The first portion is shaky as Patterson moved toward the subject. In the clearer middle section, the figure walks away from the men along the creek bed. The creature has silvery brown or dark reddish-brown hair covering most of its body, including its prominent breasts. It turns its head and looks over its right shoulder at the camera, a moment captured in frame 352, before continuing into the trees. Patterson later said the creature turned to look at them 3 times, though 2 of those occasions were before filming began or during pauses. After the encounter, the men tracked the creature for 1 to 3 miles but lost it in heavy undergrowth. They then returned to the film site, measured the creature's step length, and made plaster casts of its footprints. The film itself quickly became central to the Bigfoot debate. Discovery UK notes that the Patterson-Gimlin film, a grainy 59.5-second clip, is considered one of the most famous pieces of evidence in cryptozoology. The film's most iconic moment is the look back at frame 352. Over the past half-century, the clip has been subjected to forensic analysis by scientists, film experts, and special effects artists, but it has never been definitively debunked. Advocates argue that the gait and muscle movement visible in the film would be difficult to fake, while critics contend that it depicts someone in a costume. Skeptics point out inconsistencies in Patterson and Gimlin's recollections and logistical questions about how the film was developed so quickly. Hoax allegations include claims by costume designer Philip Morris that he sold a gorilla suit to Patterson, a claim Morris's widow later disputed, and assertions that Bob Hieronymus, a Yakima resident, wore the suit. Film analysts, such as Bill Munns, have argued that the suit explanation fails to account for the creature's proportions and movement. Mainstream science remains unconvinced of the film's authenticity, but even skeptics acknowledge that the footage sparked decades of curiosity and research. For our purposes, the Patterson-Gimlin film is important because it cemented the modern image of Sasquatch, a tall, hair-covered bipedal creature walking away from the observer in a forest clearing, glancing back once. Whether one interprets the figure as an unknown primate or a person in costume, the film's imagery has become part of cultural consciousness. In the next section, we turn from visual evidence to another type of encounter: sounds in the night and the feeling of presence. Many Bigfoot encounters are auditory rather than visual. Campers and hikers report hearing whoops, howls, grunts, and knocking sounds coming from the forest at night. Some describe rhythmic tree knocks. Others recall a high-pitched scream unlike any known animal. Perhaps the most famous alleged audio evidence is the Sierra Sounds, a series of recordings made by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry in the Sierra Nevada mountains beginning in 1971. According to the Sierra Sounds page, the recordings captured howls, grunts, and knocking sounds, as well as a supposed form of language dubbed samurai chatter. Moorhead and Berry are heard quietly talking in the recording before distant howls begin. They call back, attempting to mimic the sounds. Retired U.S. Navy cryptologic linguist Scott Nelson analyzed the recordings and concluded that the vocalizations constitute a language that is definitely not human in origin and could not have been faked. However, scientific consensus holds that allegations of Bigfoot remain within pseudoscience, and no formal studies have been conducted on the Sierra Sounds. Outside of these recordings, countless anecdotal reports describe sounds in remote forests. Hunters hear knocking sounds like wood striking wood, sometimes interpreted as communication or warning signals. Hikers report deep, chesty howls that make the hair on their necks stand up. In some cases, people camp near streams and hear heavy footsteps circling their campsite just beyond the firelight. The feeling that something is moving just out of sight is common. Because dense vegetation and damp soils muffle noise, even large animals can move quietly. A Sasquatch, if it exists, would likely use this to its advantage, moving around campsites to observe while remaining unseen. Skeptics note that many alleged Sasquatch vocalizations resemble known animals. Black bears are capable of producing moans and screams when agitated. Elk and foxes can emit high-pitched cries. Large owls and other birds may produce vocalizations unfamiliar to casual campers. The Sierra Sounds themselves may have been created by humans or animals recorded at a distance. Without verifiable context or repeatable results, they do not constitute scientific evidence. Nevertheless, the prevalence of auditory encounters speaks to a core element of the Sasquatch narrative: the sensation of presence. People on both sides of the debate agree that the feeling of being watched is often more compelling than a fleeting visual. Statistical studies provide another way to interpret auditory and visual encounters. In 2023, data scientist Flo Foxon published a paper in the Journal of Zoology analyzing the correlation between Bigfoot sightings and black bear populations across the United States and Canada. Foxon noted that Bigfoot's reported height of 6 to 9 feet is similar to that of adult black bears when they stand on their hind legs. By accounting for human population size and forest area, the study found that Bigfoot sightings increase 4% for every 1,000 black bears in a given region. The analysis suggests that many sightings may be misidentifications of bears. Foxon emphasized that the study does not prove Bigfoot does not exist, but supports the idea that a significant number of encounters could have mundane explanations. Such findings highlight the challenge of relying on auditory or fleeting visual evidence. Our next section explores the human element of Sasquatch accounts, the eyewitnesses who swear they have seen it. Eyewitness testimony makes up the bulk of Sasquatch lore. Hunters, hikers, fishermen, loggers, and park rangers across the Pacific Northwest describe encounters with large, hair-covered bipeds. These accounts share common features despite spanning decades and different backgrounds. Witnesses often note broad shoulders and long arms, a flat or slightly conical head, and a muscular build. They frequently comment on the creature's intelligence, the sense that it was as aware of them as they were of it. The emotional tone of these stories is usually not excitement, but unease or respect. People describe feeling reluctant to return to certain areas, not because of fear of attack, but because they sensed they had entered someone else's space. The Oregon Encyclopedia recounts that after 1958, woods workers on both sides of the Cascade Mountains reported seeing creatures crossing roads at night, striding furtively through forest and mountain terrain, and even digging for and eating ground squirrels in rock piles. These sightings became part of logging camp culture, manifested as serious stories, jokes, and chainsaw sculptures. The encyclopedia also notes that by the 1970s, Peter Byrne established a Bigfoot information center in the Dalles, Oregon, to collect eyewitness testimony and footprint casts. Today, organizations like the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, map sighting reports and maintain databases of alleged encounters. Of course, eyewitness reports are subject to error and bias. Humans are prone to misperceive shapes and sounds in low light. Memory can alter details, and the desire to be part of a story can influence what people think they saw. Nevertheless, the consistency of certain details across independent accounts cannot be ignored. Many witnesses describe the creature's ability to navigate rough terrain silently and to match the observer's movements, behavior consistent with the idea of a forest-dwelling primate with intelligence comparable to ours. In some stories, the Sasquatch emits a low growl or whistle when it realizes it has been seen, then retreats into dense cover. In others, it steps into view briefly at the edge of a clearing, looks directly at the observer, and then disappears. These patterns mirror the behavior described in older indigenous stories of forest people who avoid rather than confront. Skeptics counter that witness reports are unreliable and that the absence of physical evidence undermines the credibility of sightings. They note that misidentification of bears, people in dark clothing, or even fallen logs in dim light could explain many accounts. They also point to the phenomenon of pareidolia, where the human brain perceives meaningful patterns, like faces or figures, where none exist. While such explanations may account for some sightings, they do not erase the fact that many hunters and backcountry workers, people experienced at identifying animals and reading the forest, believe they have encountered something unknown. Whether one views these accounts as evidence of an undiscovered primate, a cultural expression of wilderness fears, or a combination of factors, they remain central to the Sasquatch narrative. As with any enduring mystery, multiple explanations have been proposed for Sasquatch. Here we outline 5 major theories, presenting evidence and counter-arguments without forcing a conclusion. One of the most popular hypotheses among believers is that Sasquatch is an undiscovered North American primate, possibly a descendant of the extinct Gigantopithecus. Proponents note that large primates existed in Asia until relatively recently and suggest a population could have migrated across the Bering Land Bridge. The Bigfoot Gigantopithecus theory posits that Bigfoots are surviving relatives of Gigantopithecus, a giant ape known from fossil teeth and jaws. This animal is estimated to have weighed over 1,000 pounds and stood up to 9 feet tall. Bigfoot gigantotheorists argue that some physical anthropologists interpret the scant fossils to indicate an upright walking ape. They suggest that the creature's large brain and upright posture would have facilitated dispersal across Asia and North America. They also note that small family groups of Gigantopithecus-like animals could wander nomadically through vast forests, remaining elusive and communicating with loud screams and howls. However, mainstream science disputes this view. Smithsonian Magazine explains that Gigantopithecus lived in South Asia, likely weighed around 1,200 pounds, and probably walked on its fists like modern orangutans. Scientists also point out that the fossil record shows Gigantopithecus went extinct about 300,000 years ago. Even Bigfoot enthusiasts acknowledge that a 1,200-pound quadruped does not match reports of a swift, agile, upright creature. Another explanation is that people are misidentifying known animals. Black bears, Ursus americanus, are abundant in the Pacific Northwest and are capable of standing on their hind legs, making them appear taller and more human-like. Science Alert reports that Bigfoot's reported height of 6 to 9 feet overlaps with the standing height of adult black bears. Data scientist Flo Foxon found that Bigfoot sightings correlate strongly with black bear populations. The frequency of reported encounters increases 4% for every 1,000 bears in a region. Foxon concludes that many sightings might simply be glimpses of bears. Additionally, bears sometimes leave 5-toed footprints when their hind and forepaws overlap, creating tracks that resemble large human footprints. Other animals that could be misidentified include elk, moose, and large humans in bulky clothing. Eyeshine from raccoons, opossums, or owls perched in foliage may be mistaken for glowing eyes. In dim light and with adrenaline pumping, even experienced outdoors people can misinterpret what they see. Hoaxes have undeniably played a role in Bigfoot history. Shortly after Jerry Crew's discovery of footprints, carved wooden feet were found among the belongings of his co-worker Ray Wallace. Wallace and a group of foresters had used wooden feet to make prints in the 1930s and again in the 1950s. While Wallace never publicly admitted to hoaxing the 1958 prints, his family's revelation in 2002 led many to conclude that at least some of the early tracks were fabricated. The Arizona State Museum notes that among hundreds of reported footprints, some are clearly fraudulent. Hoaxes also extend to photographs, films, and audio recordings. People have donned gorilla suits for publicity stunts, created fake footprint casts to sell to tourists, and produced doctored images to gain attention on social media. The existence of hoaxes does not prove that all evidence is fake, but it necessitates skepticism when evaluating new claims. A fourth perspective focuses on behavior rather than species. Advocates argue that the patterns described in indigenous stories and modern sightings suggest an intelligent, possibly hominin creature that consciously avoids humans. The BFRO notes that Bigfoots are typically sighted near remote wooded, mountainous, or swampy areas and are rarely seen far from tree cover. If they encounter humans during daylight, they tend to retreat and vanish into the forest. They are most active when humans are least active late at night. They move nomadically in small family groups, do not stay in one place long, and use powerful vocalizations to communicate across miles. Such behavior could explain why physical evidence is scarce. A small population of intelligent animals that is alert to human presence and avoids leaving remains in accessible areas would be difficult to find. Critics respond that the behavior described is inferred from anecdotal reports and may simply reflect human interpretations rather than real animal strategies. Without verified observations of Sasquatch behavior, this theory remains speculative. The scientific community generally regards Sasquatch as a subject of cryptozoology rather than biology. Science Alert notes that Bigfoot enthusiasts rely heavily on anecdotal accounts, grainy footage, and footprint casts. The absence of bones, teeth, or any physical remains undermines the credibility of the reports. Even the Sierra Sounds have not been subjected to formal scientific study and are considered part of pseudoscience. Skeptics argue that correlations with bear populations, the influence of hoaxes, and the lack of a breeding population's evidence point toward misidentification and folklore rather than a new species. They acknowledge that stories of wild men and forest people are fascinating, but they interpret them as cultural expressions of the human relationship with wilderness rather than documentation of an undiscovered animal. The purpose of outlining these theories is not to resolve the debate but to illustrate the range of explanations offered. Each theory addresses some aspects of the evidence while leaving others unanswered. As we prepare to conclude, we turn to the question of why the Sasquatch story has persisted for so long. Despite decades of investigation, hoaxes, and scientific skepticism, the Sasquatch legend endures. Part of its resilience lies in the media. The History Channel notes that after the 1958 newspaper articles, Bigfoot became a character in adventure magazines and paperback novels. By the 1970s, pseudo-documentaries were investigating his existence, and films were portraying him as dangerous. In the 1980s, Bigfoot softened into an environmental icon. The 1987 film Harry and the Hendersons portrayed him as friendly and in need of protection. Joshua Blue Booze, author of Bigfoot, The Life and Times of a Legend, argues that Bigfoot takes on momentum as a media icon. Like werewolves, people no longer need an explanation of who Bigfoot is. The image is immediately recognizable and easily referenced. The legend also persists because it speaks to deeper human concerns. The Oregon Encyclopedia observes that Bigfoot stories have become part of regional folklore and are used in literature to explore changing attitudes toward the natural world. Some writers depict Bigfoot as a charismatic megafauna that helps remythologize connections between humans and the wild in a landscape that has been compromised by logging and development. In other words, the figure allows people to imagine that something untamed and unknown still exists in forests that have been logged, dammed, and subdivided. In an age of biodiversity loss and climate change, the idea that a large mammal could evade us offers a kind of comfort. Nature still has secrets. Indigenous perspectives add another dimension. For many First Nations and Native American communities, Sasquatch is not a cryptid to be hunted, but a being that reminds humans of their place. It is part of the land and part of their stories, connecting present generations to ancestors. As the Oregon Encyclopedia notes, situating Bigfoot within traditional belief systems represents a spiritual connection to the pre-contact past. The persistence of the legend reinforces cultural continuity and respect for the natural world. Finally, unresolved mysteries invite endless speculation. The fact that the Patterson-Gimlin film has never been definitively proven or disproven leaves a tantalizing gap. Footprint casts, blurry photographs, nighttime howls, and eyewitness accounts keep adding pieces to a puzzle that may have no final image. Whether one interprets the pattern as evidence of an undiscovered primate, a composite of misidentifications and hoaxes, or a cultural phenomenon, the discussion itself becomes part of the story. Each new report, each documentary or podcast episode, each campfire story extends the narrative and keeps the possibility alive. We return to the forest. The rain has eased, but droplets continue to fall from moss-laden branches onto ferns below. Light filters through the canopy in thin shafts, illuminating patches of green and then fading. The Pacific Northwest rainforests feel ancient because they are, centuries-old trees, epiphytic gardens, nurse logs hosting new life. In this environment, the idea of a forest person, a Sasquatch, does not seem out of place. Whether or not such a being physically exists, the stories remind us that we are not the only ones in these woods. The legend cautions us to respect the boundaries of wild places and to acknowledge that not everything is meant to be seen. As you drift into sleep, imagine walking along a stream under giant spruce and hemlock. The air is damp and cool, the ground soft underfoot. You sense that something is watching you from the tree line but choose not to look. You keep your pace steady, listening to the sound of water and the distant calls of birds. The feeling is not fear, but awareness. In the Pacific Northwest, that awareness is part of the landscape. The High Strangeness Sleep Society thanks you for joining us. Good night.